So most people think that the best of the Bitcoin ETF flows are behind us. But today we're going to be looking at the breaking announcement of one of America's oldest and biggest banks of what they just did, because it looks as if they're getting into Bitcoin. So this is the chart showing us that the Bitcoin ETF flows have really slowed down over the past 4 to 5 weeks. And you can actually see pretty clearly that this chart, it's kind of showed that the Bitcoin price has really reacted to these Bitcoin ETF flows. We can see the biggest yellow bars on this chart representing the Bitcoin ETF flows. That has corresponded with the Bitcoin price going up a lot. But if you look at the past 6 weeks of Bitcoin ETF data, there hasn't been a whole lot of flows. So most people think, hey, the best of the Bitcoin ETF days are behind us. Bitcoin's boring. Some people even think that Bitcoin's topped. But I want to show you guys a couple of really interesting developments that have happened in the past week. So this here is one of them. BNY Mellon reveals investments in Bitcoin spot ETFs. We can see very clearly that this is the oldest bank in America, BNY Mellon. Now, typically, the older banks are the most risk adverse. So it's very interesting that they're now adopting Bitcoin. Okay, so BNY Mellon is the largest custodian bank, and it's stepped into the world of Bitcoin ETFs. It was founded in 2007 through the merger of the Bank of New York and Mellon Financial Corporation. Okay, so we can see here that in a recent filing with the SEC, BNY Mellon revealed its exposure to the Bitcoin ETFs. Doesn't that remind you about what happened with the Kingdom of Bhutan and how they were quietly mining and buying Bitcoin for a number of years, over 5 years, in fact? And the only reason we found out about it was from the bankruptcy filings coming out from Celsius and BlockFi. Almost looks like something similar is happening here, because BNY Mellon hasn't come out and said, look, we're publicly buying the Bitcoin ETFs. The Bitcoin ETFs launched over 3 months ago, if I look at my calendar correctly. That was in early January, okay? So it was only through this disclosure with the SEC that we actually found out about BNY Mellon and their investments into Bitcoin. You can see the Form 13F here. This is an official document coming from BNY Mellon, and buried in that document was the news about their Bitcoin investments. So again, this is massive and this is big. Now, before I show you the other news and the other banks getting into Bitcoin, let's cover the specifics to see exactly what they are actually buying, okay? What ETF are they buying? That's a really, really interesting question, okay? Because we all want to know, are they buying Fidelity? Are they buying, BlackRock? Are they buying other ETFs? Well, let's have a look, because this article here is an interesting one. We can see that the filing reveals the bank's strategic moves in the Bitcoin market, highlighting 3 distinct purchases of BlackRock's ETF IBIT. So, and they bought a lot of IBIT, okay? So they have $720,000 invested into these Bitcoin spot ETFs. So it's not a massive investment, okay? Just short of $1 million. And we can see the bank also has involvement with GBTC, made 2 notable investments of GBTC worth $405,000. So if you add up the investments between IBIT and GBTC, BNY Mellon, America's oldest bank, has invested over $1 million in a Bitcoin. Pretty sizable, pretty interesting. But again, on its own, not really that newsworthy. Something that is newsworthy is BNY Mellon is not alone. So again, have a look at the date. This is what I find interesting. Morgan Stanley is now considering allowing 15,000 brokers to recommend Bitcoin ETFs. Okay, so this is, again, another headline in the same week. And Morgan Stanley is a big one. Okay, have a look at the date here of this article. This is April 26, 2024. How old was the BNY Mellon article? Well, did you look at that? April 27th. Nearly as if we're seeing a little bit of competition or a little bit of FOMO by the big boys and the big banks. Okay, we talk about this a lot on the channel. We are going to see a competitive FOMO into these Bitcoin products. When one bank allows it, all of the other banks are going to have to allow it because Bitcoin's the best performing asset in history. Any hedge fund or any bank who has a tiny exposure to Bitcoin, whether that be 0.1%, 1%, 5%, that is going to generate them some outperformance, some alpha, okay? And this is going to cause other banks to have to do a similar thing and have to also allocate to Bitcoin, okay? So first it was BNY Mellon, and then we have Morgan Stanley, okay? Let's have a look at what Morgan Stanley is doing, okay? Morgan Stanley, Bitcoin adoption, a potential game changer. The reason it's a game changer is because they have 15,000 brokers under its wing, okay? That's a lot of brokers. That's a lot of people who are now going to go out there and do marketing for their Bitcoin ETF products. Again, most brokers might have hundreds. They might even have thousands of clients, okay? Massive, 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 massive. Lots of people are going to be exposed to Bitcoin very, very, very shortly, okay? Let's have a look. Is there any other little nuggets so we can see here, Morgan Stanley's plan to enable its brokers to recommend Bitcoin ETFs directly to customers could inject a fresh energy and capital into the Bitcoin market. Okay, so again, that's what a lot of people are kind of not quite thinking about. Fresh capital coming into the market, new capital coming into the market. On Tuesday, the Hong Kong Bitcoin ETFs are potentially going to be launching. Does that give China access to Bitcoin ETFs? People have varied opinions about it, but this is potentially coming very, very soon, okay? Morgan Stanley come in with their 15,000 brokers. BNY Mellon, America's oldest bank, has quietly been buying the Bitcoin ETFs. It doesn't look like things are slowing down. It only looks as if people are getting more and more interested in Bitcoin. So again, nobody knows what's going to happen with the Bitcoin ETF flows, but I would be surprised if the flows continue decreasing like they have over the past 5 weeks, okay? So we've talked a lot about the banks, but guess what? Tesla continues to hodl its 9,000 Bitcoin that it has. There's been so much negative press surrounding Tesla and how they sold some Bitcoin and all of this stuff and how they stopped accepting Bitcoin for payment. But we can see they're still holding. The world's richest man still holds Bitcoin on the balance sheet for Tesla. And I'm assuming he also still holds it on the balance sheet of his private company, SpaceX. Okay, so you can see the receipts here. Public company, 9,700 Bitcoin. Very, very bullish. You can see he's bought Bitcoin once in one transaction. He had 2 transactions where he paper-handed Bitcoin in 2021 and 2022. So again, everything is looking good for Bitcoin. I know there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of people saying the top is in with Bitcoin. A lot of people are saying it's all over, but it doesn't quite look that way to me. It looks as if the big boys are still continuing to get involved in Bitcoin, okay, which is, again, what you want to see. Another article that came out this week that is related to this broader story of the big boys getting involved in Bitcoin, we can see here, traditional firms allocate millions into Fidelity, FBTC, amid ETF rebound, okay? So this is coming from a post from everybody's favorite ETF guru, Eric Balchunas, and he shows us that Fidelity has a new high watermark, okay? 2 different advisors each put $20 million into Fidelity, okay? One is from Kansas and the other Minnesota. The percentage of portfolio is also pretty high, 6% and 5%. Okay, this edges out the $17 million an advisor put into IBIT. So again, these are massive, massive, massive allocations into Bitcoin for the traditional finance world. Okay, 5% allocation, 6% allocation. You can see here, this is the homepage of the Kansas investment firm that put, well, in Eric's word, that plowed $20 million into Fidelity. This is as boomer as it gets. Likely a wonderful site for those hoping to see long-term adoption, okay? Long-term adoption. They just updated their website. We're coming for your coins, degens. The memes on Bitcoin Twitter are honestly undefeated. We're coming for your coins, degens. But that's what's happening. They are coming for the Bitcoin. The big boys are still coming for Bitcoin. Okay, I think it's as simple as that. I think McLovin puts it nicely in the chat. It's a great time to accumulate. The giant, aka Bitcoin. Bitcoin is taking a nap right now, and I think a lot of people are feeling really down about this chart here. They're feeling really down about the flows into Bitcoin decreasing recently. But from all the signs we've looked at in today's video, I mean, I don't know how we can be bearish on Bitcoin, okay? And I think this chart here is a really fascinating one from Checkmate because it adds some perspective about ETFs, okay? You could see this chart in the blue. This is actually showing you the ETF holdings of gold, okay? And pink is showing you the price of gold in US dollars. Now, what's really interesting is the two of these things were very correlated, although pretty well correlated for a pretty long amount of time. Okay, I think we can kind of see clearly that the price of gold was correlated to the ETF flows until they're not. And we can see more recently, especially when central banks have began accumulating gold in really big size in 2022, 2023, and 2024, we can see a massive divergence in this chart. Okay, so again, all of these models and all of these ideas, they're correlated until they're not. And this is exactly what has happened with gold because recently the price of gold has completely broke this correlation recently. It's been pumping while the ETF flows have been decreasing, okay? Now, again, why are the ETF flows of gold decreasing over the past few years? Well, I mean, maybe investors want the physical gold. I think the Bitcoin ETFs in January has kind of accelerated this trend because we've seen in the data very clearly January, February, March, in the months where Bitcoin had its biggest inflows, the gold ETFs were having its biggest outflows, okay? So again, this is interesting, but I think this really does show to say, it kind of shows that, you know, yes, we talk about the ETFs a lot here on the channel. We do think they're a pretty big signal about how things are changing in the Bitcoin space, but at the end of the day, the ETFs don't control the price of Bitcoin, okay? We have a spot market. Okay, and we know that there's nation states out there mining Bitcoin. Okay, just because we have the flows from the ETFs right now decreasing, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't expect Bitcoin to rally. Okay, nobody knows where the price of Bitcoin is going to go. Again, we always talk about that, but the ETF flows aren't everything. So that's a lot about the ETFs. We talked a lot about the ETFs today. I wanted to end today's video on a more interesting note, and that is talking directly about this interview I just found here, because it really does show to say, well, it really shows so, you know, how much knowledge altcoiners who create altcoins have about Bitcoin. I'm just going to play this without any, you know what, I'm going to read out Pledis's caption here. He says he always finds it funny with long-time Web3 VCs have an embarrassing lack of Bitcoin knowledge. So this guy talking about the Bitcoin halving, again, just happened last week, happy halving everyone, is asking some interesting questions about Bitcoin and the halving. And again, this guy is the CEO of a altcoin called Compound. Okay, in the last bull run, this had a multi-$10 billion market cap. So this was, you know, this was known as the blue chip altcoin, okay? So let's listen to what their CEO thinks and knows about Bitcoin.
Is it priced in? That's the is it priced in? That's the is it priced in, or do you have to, I don't know.
Okay, let me ask one technical question for anyone who knows the answer. Maybe none of us know the answer. Is it 4 years based on like a Unix time, or in the actual Bitcoin software, or is it based on an expected number of blocks based on
expected
block size? It's number of blocks.
Expected blocks.
Yeah, it's number of blocks.
It's like the difficulty adjustment deals with the time delay, right, and then the actual happening blocks.
So it's not every 4 years. So to be clear,
it's close every 4 years. On average, every 4 years.
Approximately.
With pretty high certainty, right? Because like over that long a period of time, it's just going to average out to basically be 4 years.
But approximately.
Okay, let me know in the chat how many of you guys know exactly when the Bitcoin halvings happen. I would like to think that most of you guys watching the channel would know that the Bitcoin halvings happen every 210,000 blocks. Okay. Pretty embarrassing that a creator of one of the biggest altcoins doesn't actually know that. And it really does kind of go to show that, you know, a lot of these people saying, you know, Bitcoin's old tech, you know, buy my new tech, they don't even understand Bitcoin in the first place. Okay. So with all that said, my laptop's going flat. So I wanted to tell you guys, if you haven't already seen our interview that we released with Fred Krueger earlier in the week, talking about the Bitcoin power law, check it out. As you can see it on screen, we talk about the power law and its predictions for Bitcoin. There's a fascinating conversation. So if you haven't seen that, really, really hope you guys enjoy that video with Fred Krueger. But my laptop's about to go flat, so I'm going to have to end today's live stream on that brighter note. McLovin says, come on, man, what are you talking about? Rob Wallace puts in the correct amounts of blocks that we expect to see every 210,000 blocks. Enjoy that interview, McLovin, if you haven't seen it already. And with all that said, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. We will see you guys with another live stream either tomorrow or Monday. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified when that drops, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.